fire us.
Good evening and welcome to the June 26, 2018 regular meeting of the Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Additionally, the agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city's website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. The roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission are outlined on the reverse side of tonight's agenda. State law establishes planning commissions. The commission is comprised of 9 members, all of whom have volunteered to serve. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. The other individuals seated at the table this evening are representatives of the city's planning department, the city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman and Associates. If you wish to address the planning commission, please come forward when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-on sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. At this time, I ask that all cell phones, PDAs, or other devices that might disrupt this meeting either be placed in silent mode or be turned off. The roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Mr. Appendidian?
Here.
Ms. Cruz? Here. Mr. Edmonds? Mr. Faison?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Here.
Ms. Koopa? Here. Mr. Zanzika?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Ms. Howe?
Quorum present. Item number 2 on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Moved by Mr. Faison and seconded by Mr. Hudson. Roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa?
Yes.
Mr. Zanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Appendidian?
Yes. Item number 3 on the agenda tonight, approval of the minutes for the June 12, 2018 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Please, motion by Mr. Zanzika and seconded by Ms. Koopa. Roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa?
Yes.
Mr. Zanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Appendidian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Item number
Here, do we? Yes.
You
We know what you meant.
Item number 4, public comment for items not on the agenda tonight. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on an item that is not on the agenda tonight? Yes, you please step up to the mic and then sign in and identify yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Already signed in. Hello, everyone. Sorry. My name is Medora Riker. I am a resident of 3944 Gatwick Drive, which is west of Rochester Road and Wattle intersection. We heard about the new development, Town Haven subdivision or apartment complex or mixed family neighborhood. I have few concerns because it's going to be on the back of my house, on the backyard. So I'm here to present some of my concerns. I don't know if it's still under review or what stage it is, but I have some concerns that I would like to put in front of you all. The first one is the safety and privacy issue. Due to the height of the development, these are like the 64-unit apartment, townhomes, single-family houses that Mondrian Properties is planning to build. They are just on the back of like 5 houses on the Gatwick. Due to the height of the development and less buffer land available to the adjacent properties, single-family homes along the Gatwick will have a townhome and apartment windows and balconies overlooking their living room and bedroom, which raises a privacy concern for me and all the neighborhood in that Gatwick property line. They will experience flashing car headlights and noise increase in the backyard because this is going to turn into a high-density neighborhood compared to the single family. Right now it's R1C zoned, and it's planning to be a neighborhood node with apartment complexes all on the back of our house. So basically, the way the plan goes, the entrances are going to be on the back of our house. So their main doors are on the back of the house and their balconies on the first floor. And they can pretty much see my living room, my master bedroom on the ground floor, and my dining area through their balconies. So that's my biggest safety concern and a privacy issue. I won't be able to use my master bedroom for quiet enjoyment. Second biggest concern I have is insufficient road infrastructure right now. So the proposed development provides 2 entrances to the townhome property on the Wattle. And due to the median divider on the Wattle near Rochester Road, the resident taking the second entrance to the property will either have to take a sharp U-turn or illegal U-turn, because there's no U there, or drive into the Gatwick, get into one of the driveways, and come out and take a right turn to get to their property. This will create increase in the traffic, which is already congested for Rochester intersection, because everybody is trying to go to the east. It will block them to go there. So it's going to back up all the, if you see one of the peak hour traffic between in the intersection of Wattles and Rochester, there's always cars backed up. And even if we coming out of Gatwick, even with waves and everything else, we are not able to get it into the right or to the left, because they are blocking the whole, the entrance to the Gatwick. So that's a big concern for safety and welfare of the kids in the neighborhood. That's my biggest concern. And based on the number of units in the proposed property, vehicles expected would be around 64 units times 2, around 128, plus visitor vehicles, buses, school buses, and whatnot. This would significantly increase the traffic flow at Wattle and Rochester Road intersection, which will pose a notable risk to pedestrians and bicyclists. People could be killed trying to cross this area. We urge the city to do a formal traffic study due to increase in such a high volume of traffic. In my, the letter, I have made a good diagram of how it looks like when people are trying to take a U-turn, what can happen, and how the peak hour congestions are right now, as of now, which is like minus 128 cars. When we add that to the whole mix, how it's going to look like. And now these are all right now low density populated, because they're all single family. R1C, pretty much Wattle from Livernois to Rochester, all is single family house, other than the commercial property just right off the Rochester Road. And this is going to turn into a highly dense populated area. So because of that, in case of fire, flash flooding, or any other emergency situation, residents will be driving hastily to evacuate, while emergency vehicle will be speeding towards the site, which will pose a safety concern for the surrounding property. And there is not sufficient right of way for emergency vehicles to take a U-turn to reach these residents. And plus, when you're going to have these many residents moving in, how the school buses, you're going to have elementary school buses, middle school buses, and high school buses coming in. Where are they? They're all going to congest between Wattle and Rochester trying to get into these properties. So these are my concerns. And every neighbors in the Eden-Derry subdivision right now have different concerns over this whole development. But these are, I thought I will put something onto your table while you're reviewing these plans. You can keep these in mind. And these are my immediate concerns. And a lot of other neighbors have a lot of other concerns right now. So we sincerely hope you will consider this impact to the surrounding community, including the property value, which is, I haven't not talked property value or wildlife. Right now, 2 acres of land, it's all woods. There's deers, there's all the other things, all the wildlife there. They'll be gone. So, and the property values, because we're gonna back the apartments, which are more like temporary housing. And, the privacy concern, and hope, the planning commission evaluates the application and ultimately make a decision based on what is extremely important for us right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishes to speak on an item that is not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we will move to item number 5, the ZBA report.
Sure, we
Ms.
had
Cooper?
3 items on the ZBA docket last Tuesday. Our meeting went quite long because the first item was quick and we approved the variance request. The second item was a little bit longer, but we did not approve the variance request. And it was kind of the second item, the first item was illustrative of why we shouldn't approve the second item, because the first, the couple had a home that they wanted to build something on, and their lots was shaped sort of differently, and so it was through no fault of their own. They wanted to build a enclosed sunroom, and they needed a variance request. It was about 4 or 5 feet from the edge of the property line, which is, or less than what it needed. And so we decided not to approve Mr. Aberthura's request for a split, because the second one would have created situations where the lot size was not regular. The third one, though, was a variance request for a property that could be used as a house of worship, but the specifications on the ordinance around the house of worship, I think it's 621E and F, if you have 6.21E F and F. Am I right, Mr. Martin? They were looking for 3 different variance requests. They were all dimensional variance requests, but we had several hours of people speaking, thinking that it was about the use. There's no objection to the use of that facility as a house of worship. The issue was they were looking for a variance request that they had difficulty because it was 50 feet, and each of those 3 dimensional variance requests were 50 feet. I don't know why they didn't understand that. The application kind of didn't really cover that piece of it. There are 2 churches further down, but this was way larger than we've ever approved, and we tried to explain to them that there's precedence. And
Excuse me, where are you talking about?
you know what used to, when I first moved here, it used to be a DSW, then it was like a Japanese steakhouse.
Oh, yeah.
It's on Rochester Road, north of Big Beaver,
Okay.
on the west side. There's 2 churches.
So it's facing Rochester Road?
Yeah. There were quite a number of people in the room. It was standing room only, and it went, by the time I got home, it was 11 o'clock. So it was just a very unusual ZBA meeting. It's usually one of our meetings. It's long, but not that long.
Just for the issue is clearly communicated to the applicant
Okay.
well before the meeting, well before the application was submitted.
But I think that the community did not understand.
Okay, that's fair.
Was it approved? Or?
Pardon?
Were the variances approved?
No, they were not approved. Because it was more than 50 feet, and there were 3 of them. I mean, that was just public safety and welfare. If we think about it, we try not, and we've been told at ZBA that our job is really not to approve everything that comes our way unless there's really a hardship. And 50 feet is just really...
They were blessed at 50-foot variances?
Yeah, 3 50-foot variances.
For not only the building, but also the parking and all activity.
Oh.
So,
Go big or go home.
yeah. So, the house of worship happens to be a mosque. So there was some concern from people around.
We're getting more people inquiring about utilization of strip malls, space in strip malls for places of worship. I think people are starting to maybe worship a little bit differently than they did 10 or 20 years ago, but our ordinance doesn't really contemplate that.
Shall we review it?
Yeah.
We could.
Isn't it good to keep ordinances like current and up to date and
Mhm.
reflective of what's going on out there in the real world? Mr. Motzney probably wants to help.
If any of you have the time or interest, I do recommend that you look at that particular variance request. I think it's important to see the applicant and what they put in and what's included in that application, just for your own edification and education.
So were they proposing to demolish the building?
No, to use that because they wanted to have a banquet hall, and the shape of that is very conducive to the way that a mosque or a Muslim community center would be. One of the neighbors, or one of the people, I don't know if they were neighbors, they were worried about the banquet hall, and I did point out, like a Hindu house of worship, a Muslim house of worship, if it has an associated banquet hall, there would be no alcohol, so at least that would not be a concern. But that was not the dimensional variance, was 50 feet, was just on 3 dimensions, was just too much, so. But yeah, please do take a look at that particular agenda item on the CPA report. I think it's important that you take a look at the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. Before we move on to item number 6, I just want to briefly mention to the resident that spoke on that item that you mentioned that project has not come before the Planning Commission yet, and we have not looked at it. We have not reviewed it. When it does come before us, we will look at all your concerns and all the other concerns that will be brought up at that time. So I just wanted to bring that up.
I was going to very briefly speak to this project during the planning and zoning review.
Sure. So we'll come to that next. So item number 6, the DDA report.
There was no DDA meeting.
No
So.
DDA. Number 7, planning and zoning report. Thank you.
So on the screen is the property that Madura was speaking of, and I had an opportunity to speak to Madura. I want to say it was Friday.
Yes.
Friday. We spoke. She relayed some concerns to me, and I told her that I would relay her concerns via email to the petitioner, which I did. The petitioner is Modrian. This is the property. You can see the zoning is R1C. Let me take the layer off here. This is the project here. There's 2 lots, rectangular lots. There's a home on one of the lots. The other one is vacant. A lot of trees. It's been it's been like this for a long time, and insofar as it hasn't been developed. Stub road here, and what the applicant is proposing to do is they seek conditional rezoning to extend this node area here, extend it to the west. So the line roughly goes here. This portion to the north would be neighborhood node and would allow for multifamily. This portion to the south would remain single family, and this stub street would be extended in a loop like this to connect here. 6 homes along here, buffering, and then 64 units. And then what I did very, very briefly, and I don't want to get into the details, we haven't even looked at it, but to be fair to our speaker and to put the Planning Commission, bring them somewhat up to speed, this is the project that's proposed. So north is this way. So here's the stub road here, 6 units. This will be developed as a cluster. These would be multifamily buildings with no vehicular access to the neighborhood. So they would retain trees here along the south. These homes would serve as a buffer from a single-family residential buffer from the single-family residential neighborhood. And then to the north would be a total of 64 units in 10 different buildings, different housing types, catering to a wide range of uses. 2 curb cuts on walls. So again, we recently received this. This has been circulated for a departmental review. I'm not prepared to answer any questions, but I thought it was fair to be fair to to our resident who spoke and also bringing someone up to speed on what she was talking about, I thought it was appropriate to show this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Savana. Anything else?
We're getting busy. We're getting busy. I've said for a while now that all the easy ones have been developed. So every parcel now has a neighbor or numerous neighbors. Obviously, neighbors are concerned with change and the potential impact on their properties. So we are very busy taking phone calls, responding to emails. We return every phone call, we return every email. We made a commitment a number of months ago to improve the quality of our presentation through PowerPoints to include an educational component. That's as important today as it was 6 months ago when we started it. We try to educate, we try to engage the public. The reason that Madura was before you this evening, prior to us even seeing the application, was we encourage applicants to meet with the neighbors. And Joe Mediacci of Mondrian reached out and met with the neighbors. I believe it was at a restaurant about a month ago. And I knew that because the next day I received about 10 phone calls and angry emails. So it's taken a lot of my time. Again, we return every email, every phone call to try to keep people up to speed. But that's the reality that we live in now. Is that all the easy ones are done. So, any other questions about anything?
I have a question.
Mr. Senzi.
Why is he going with neighborhood note versus some multiple family zoning?
You'd have to ask the petitioner that.
Because it would be appropriate, wouldn't it, for a multiple zoning?
Well, it's a conditional rezoning application, so my guess is that the neighborhood note afforded the flexibility that Mondrian felt was needed to achieve the project that they want. The neighborhood note, the flexibility is a positive. Now, there are higher permitted heights, but as a conditional rezoning application, the site plan would be voluntarily offered as part of the conditional rezoning application, so the applicant would restrict the height and the density and all those things through the conditional rezoning application. So it's a way to try to come up with a win-win, so that the applicant could seek the financial return that they wanted in their investment, but it would also somewhat protect the neighbors and reduce the negative impacts on the properties that's around.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Savana? Ms. Cooper.
Is it specifically our planning department that is so busy, or is this a wave of development going on nationally, or at least in pockets around the country or pockets around the state? Because there's been articles, I think I shared one a few weeks ago with you to share with everyone.
So I'm going to defer to our planning consultant who works in a lot of different communities and ask him.
I can't speak nationally because I don't work nationally. Southeast Michigan has been hot. It's been hot for a number of years now. Detroit is a stronger environment than a lot of places in Southeast Michigan, so we are seeing more investment in Troy than I think we are seeing in some other communities in Southeast Michigan. But I would say overall development is up right now throughout Southeast Michigan. I do think, though, that there is going to be some sort of correction in the next, probably, people I talked to, probably in early 2020. So, we have about another year of this kind of intensity, but I think it's going to slow down a little bit.
And is it mostly condos and apartments, what people are calling temporary housing?
Every community is different. Some communities allow different types of housing products than others. We are not seeing many condo projects being built anymore because the financing is difficult to get. We're seeing mostly, if it's multifamily, it's an apartment style development. I can't remember the last true condo project that we have reviewed, not only here, but in any other communities we're working in right now.
And is there any interaction between the planning department and the school district as a result of the impact of, and it's not just in Troy, but anywhere else? Because that is...
Again, every community works differently with their school districts. Some have a very good working relationship where they have quarterly meetings and they're very aware of what's going on. Some don't have a very good relationship at all. One of the difficulties here in Michigan and nationally is that school districts are exempt from any zoning laws, so they don't necessarily come to the city for any approval. So we don't necessarily know what's going on with the school district. The only time that they have to follow zoning and building laws is if they sell their property to a private developer and they have to come in for our approval. So, you know, most communities do update the school districts in terms of what development's going on so they can do their population projections. But most districts do that on their own. They do their own studies to figure out what their population projections are going to be and what their needs are going to be. So, like I said, every community is different and works differently with their school district. It's not a one size fits all with every community for that.
So, for not getting into trouble with Mr. Savadat, is it possible that we find out what kind of relationship do we have with our Troy School District and any of the other school districts that fall within Troy, and what all these new housing may have? Are they aware? Do you have any conversation with Dr. Macheski or anyone in the?
So I attended a joint meeting of the school district and city council about, I want to say about 6 weeks ago.
Okay.
And Dr. Macheski he explained the school district's position on the development and how they respond to development applications. But what I'm going to request is that they provide something to our planning commission so that the planning commission can be informed of their plans.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Cooper? I'm sorry, Ms. Cruz.
You were close.
Maybe it's the way.
I mean, I know we're not into any other part of the agenda, but I just want to touch a second on what Ms. Koopa brought up, and that is last Tuesday night when I wasn't here enjoying myself. I was enjoying myself on the tennis court at a club I belong to here in Troy, and many of the ladies who were doing the ladies' night specifically had a conversation with me about concerns with buildings in the district. And what they were witnessing firsthand in terms of classroom sizes and teachers' ability to manage, that many kids, the ratio being 29-30 to 1, and their concern given the quality that the district has always stood for and how that may be affected or diminished by far too many students. And, I had said to them that we had always been told that there was some capacity in the district, that these additional developments weren't necessarily affecting capacity. So I bring this up only because I think it supports the concern that Ms. Cooper raises, and not because she's an exceptionally well-informed citizen, but also because these women, they're just talking what they see when they drop their kids off. They're just talking about what they're witnessing and not in the context that Ms. Koopa is talking about. So I do think that it's something that bears discussion here. Mm-hmm. And so I look forward to whatever you can get from the district and maybe a district representative to do a little question and answer for us.
Or dialogue with us.
It's not the first time we've heard concerns about the school.
Understood. Hey, Brett, I was just going to ask you, you mentioned you were at the joint meeting with the district and the council. Was that a topic of discussion at that meeting, that specific issue, the construction and the school capacity, or was there a different focus to that?
Yeah, I don't believe it was an agenda item, so I was near the beginning of the agenda because I had a planning commission meeting immediately afterwards, so I presented my item, listened to the response of Dr. Macheski, then I left to come here. My presentation was just an update to the Troy School District about the status of the properties that they had sold, ironically enough, to develop as residential properties. Mm-hmm. Right. And I presented that report, and then Dr. Macheski was asked about the potential impact of development on schools, and it was an impromptu response, but it was very articulate and thoughtful. But again, it was not an agenda item.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you. If there are no other questions for Mr. Savidan, then we'll move to item number 8 on the agenda, preliminary site plan review, file number SP JPLN 2016-0030, proposed home 2 suites north of Big Beaver, west of Crooks, part of parcel 88-20-476-060, section 20, currently zoned BB, Big Beaver District. Mr. Savidan.
Mr. Chairman, the way that we would like to present this is the applicant submitted a video. There were three members who were absent the last time we discussed this. And they did not have an opportunity to view the video. So it's very brief. I'd like to present the video, have Mr. Carlisle provide a status and update on where we are today. Sarah Merrill is here from OHM. She's our traffic consultant. I would ask Sarah to briefly summarize the shared parking situation. Following that, Kenny Koza is here from Group 10. The applicant, his engineer, Jim Butler's here, and Julie Kroll, the traffic engineer, is here. So they can answer any questions, they can make a presentation, what have you. But that's the order I'd like to present, if that's okay with you. Thank you. So first, we'll start with the video.
Every engineer is like a jigsaw puzzle. Each is made up of lots of unique and colorful pieces. And with a little cooperation and a lot of hard work, all the pieces come together to form a bigger picture that we call At Group 10. We think of ourselves as an important part of Troy and of every community in the district. We're a family-owned and totally self-funded company that has been building and managing hotels and other businesses for over 40 years. We've developed millions of dollars in successful, high-quality, full and select service hotels. At Group 10, we guide each project from the ground up. We're completely hands-on. We serve as the owner, contractor, and manager for life. And that's what we bring to the city of Troy. Welcome to Home 2 Suites by Hilton. This modern, innovative, extended stay hotel is a fresh concept that consistently receives outstanding reviews on TripAdvisor, Google, and other online travel sites. For a project of this size, comes with many questions about its fit and its future. Does Troy really need another hotel? Our Home 2 Suites hotel will be a complementary asset to the city of Troy. Aside from the jobs it will create, this project will provide the area with 107 additional extended stay rooms, which will easily be absorbed into the current market. At present, there are only 4 other extended stay hotels in the area. We know the Home 2 Suites will provide an excellent fit for the city of Troy. How will this hotel affect the market? The economic forecast for Troy suggests a rapid and positive growth, as indicated by the hotel study and star report provided. This trend will allow for the expansion of not just hotels like ours, but also apartments and retail outlets. As these commercial entities grow and office space quickly fills, a hotel like Home 2 Suites will be a valuable complement to this growing and diverse community. Without a diverse hotel component, the city of Troy is incomplete, making visitors and business alike look elsewhere to conduct their business. Can it be retrofitted? If occupancy becomes less than expected, our Home 2 Suites hotel can certainly be retrofitted into apartments or condominiums. The hotel box itself is a very adaptable footprint. Should the future need ever arise, these units can easily be turned into apartments, micro-apartments, and even office suites. But truthfully, if the Home 2 overhead is not as successful as anticipated, this box will most likely turn into another hotel, perhaps of a different style, before it ever becomes something else. How will it look in the future? Home 2 Suites by Hilton are modern, attractive, well-designed pieces of architecture. Traditionally, Home 2 Suites are constructed of wood, but the Group 10 version is a block and precast structure that is constructed to last for the next 100 years and beyond. But for us, this building is more than just a hotel or a brick wall. We spare no expense in creating a generational asset we look forward to owning and operating as a business and as a family. Because in Group 10, what about the city of Troy is just a flagging market or a valuable property? To us, it's a priority, a passion. We want to play our part in how our future and ours come together. Because with Home 2 Suites, we want this to be our home too.
Chairman of the Planning Commission, I have a short presentation based on my memo, and I'm going to go over a few slides that are redundant from what we discussed at the last meeting, but this is just to bring everyone on the same page and make sure we all have an understanding of what the project is. Homes 2 is proposed as the site is proposed as a extended stay hotel. It's approximately 1.5 acres in area. It's highlighted in red. The site is located just west of Crooks Road off Wilshire Drive, and it's just behind the Chipotle / noodle strip mall that fronts on Crooks Road. The site is zoned Big Beaver. It's surrounded by Big Beaver zoning on all sides as well as commercial zoning on all sides. We will note that hotels now, based on a text amendment by the Planning Commission and the Council, require special use. However, this was submitted prior to that zoning ordinance amendment, so it is being treated as a permitted use. The applicant is proposing a 5-story, approximately 55,000 square feet hotel. It has 107 rooms, and this includes both a shared access as well as shared parking. The Planning Commission reviewed this at their May 22nd meeting, and there were about 6 items that were discussed as part of the Planning Commission review. And I'm going to go over each of these individually and address how the applicant has addressed them. The first is the access from Big Beaver. The second is the pedestrian access from the shared parking area. The third is the building materials / transparency calculation. The fourth is parking lot landscaping. The fifth is the photometric plan. And the sixth, which is the most outstanding item that we were under discussion, was the issue of the parking study and the shared parking agreement. The applicant has obtained 2 points of access through easements. The first is an access off Wilshire, located in this where my red dot is highlighted. The second point of access that the applicant has secured more recently is a direct access off of Big Beaver. The Planning Commission discussed this matter at the last meeting and presented concerns with regards to, one, the potential speedway that could be caused by that long straight length of roadway, in addition to the condition of that roadway. The applicant has noted that there is parking on both sides of this aisle going all the way up, and they feel that that alone will detract or slow down drivers because they have a much more confined sense of area. I ran that by the engineering department, and they do concur with that there will be just natural speed reduction just because there is parking on both sides of that aisle. In regards to the condition of that, the applicant has not given us any indication that they are planning on it to improve that drive, and so that might be a question that they can address at tonight at the meeting. With regards to pedestrian access, when the Planning Commission last reviewed this at the meeting, there was concern because the access was really located in the middle of a parking space. The applicant has moved them over, so my red line indicates an actual dedicated pedestrian access point that is striped and does not go through any parking spaces. So there is a set area for pedestrians to access both the shared parking to the south as well as the shared parking to the east. The applicant has revised their elevations to reduce the amount of EFS and replace those EFS bands with brick. If the Planning Commission remembers, all these towers were EFS material. They've replaced that with the brick material. So in total, the amount of EFS proposed for all 4 elevations average about 8% of total EFS on those elevations. In addition, we did note in our report that they did not provide the transparency calculation that was provided between our report going out and the meeting tonight, and they do meet the proposed transparency requirements for the Big Beaver district. One of the other items of discussion was the parking lot landscaping. We did note in the last review that they were deficient on the number of parking landscape parking requirement. They had only provided enough parking landscape parking for their actual parking on their site. However, we did note that they have to accommodate all the parking that they're using. And so they have put in the required 19 parking lot trees as required, so they do meet the ordinance requirements for that. Can't read this plan, but the applicant was over in terms of their photometrics, both at the property level as well as the maximum at any single location. So they have revised their photometrics so that they do meet all the photometric requirements. So the last item of significant discussion was the issue of the parking study and shared parking. The applicant is providing a total of 146 total parking spaces for their use. Based on 107 hotel room plus approximately 5 or so employees, we would be required to provide approximately 112 parking spaces, so they are significantly over that required number. However, we do note that 60 of those 146 are on their site itself within the red boxed area. They have a shared parking agreement to provide 36 shared parking with the Eastern Strip Mall located in this location, and they have 50 shared parking with the South Office building that fronts on Big Beaver. The city's traffic consultant did do a review of their parking study, and at this point I will hand over to Sarah Morrell from OHM to discuss the parking study, and any questions for Sarah and I after her presentation will be open for any questions.
Good evening, I'm Sarah Merrill with OHM. The applicant did prepare a parking study. The site has about half on site, a little less than that, of the required parking per the ordinance requirements. So they are proposing shared parking with the adjacent strip mall, which is a combination of retail and dining, as well as the office building, the Riemann Center off of Big Beaver. The shared parking study demonstrates it was 59% of the parking is off-site. During the peak parking hours, that's the time of day when, considering for the peak parking of each land use, during those peak periods, they do have a surplus of approximately 40 parking spaces. That peak parking demand, considering the office, the retail, the residential, and the hotel, occurs in the middle of the day at 10 a.m. and at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. So that's largely driven by the office center and the retail restaurant. That's the time of day when the hotel is demanding the least amount of parking. In the evening hours is when the hotel ramps up parking as people are coming back for the evening and overnight. And that's the time of day that you're going to see a lot of the hotel parking spilling over into those shared parking sites. As part of the parking study, one of the elements that was considered was the retail center, the retail dining strip center. Those two buildings off of Crooks currently already have a shared parking agreement in place. The parking that fronts to Crooks is a little bit further than we'd like to see going to the hotel as shared parking. There'd be the building in the way. It's not really a nice, convenient walking route for pedestrians. So as part of the shared parking study, they went out and they did occupancy counts where they looked at by hour during a couple day period how full that parking lot was, and in particular that back portion of the parking lot that's shared with the hotel, what the occupancy rate of parking spaces in that lot was. They found basically during the lunch peak that parking lot is near capacity. Because of the hotel occupancy patterns, that's the time of day the hotel doesn't really need to park over there. They have enough parking during the midday period to handle on their own site. As parking winds down for dining uses, mainly the lunch crowd, that back parking lot behind the strip center starts to free up, and that's when the hotel parking, you would see that sharing over in that area as well as with the office center. Any questions? Yeah.
You mentioned that there was already shared parking where? There in existence?
There's two strip centers adjacent to each other. There's the one on the corner and then the one just south of that.
Okay, so the one...
They both front to Crooks.
They both front to Crooks. So the one on the corner is the one that has the Einstein's Bagels next to...
Party Stripe. There's a Papa Romano's and Party.
Yeah, the Papa Romano's, yes. And then the other one is the Noodles...
To the north, yes.
To the north, right.
Yes.
And they already have a shared...
Those two strip centers have a shared parking agreement in place.
They already have a shared, so, okay, I got it.
But there's a blockade, or there's a blockage,
Yeah.
a block between Einstein and the one to the
That's
north,
right.
as I recall.
So raised is a different level too.
So that, they do not have a shared parking agreement with the properties to the south, nor do they have vehicular cross-access. So there's not a reciprocal cross-access agreement on the property to the south. So that property owner put up bumper blocks, which is his right.
The shared parking we're speaking of is this This strip mall, and this strip mall
Right.
is where the shared parking is, and the shared parking with the hotel
That's with the
is proposed for this
Hot
location.
Potbelly's.
Potbelly there, yeah.
Right, Einstein is like the one right above Starbucks.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's not included.
The second one. Yeah.
That one right there.
So I think the shared parking that Ms. Morel was discussing is shared parking between these.
That's
these
correct.
two
Okay,
buildings.
got it,
And then the proposed shared parking with the hotel in this building is located in this location back here.
got it, okay.
And the shared parking, just to be clear, the shared parking with the office is located in that location.
Got it. Thank you.
Just a question. Yeah, I have a question on the shared parking for the office building. Did you study the usage of that?
The office building as part of the shared parking was evaluated. That office building today is a mix of medical office and traditional office. For the purposes of this parking study, the parking calculations were based on the ordinance rates for medical office, which is a more intense parking generator.
And I was just curious, maybe you mentioned, I missed it, but the usage of that space. You mentioned the retail space was 90% occupied in the lunchtime and...
They did not calculate occupancy for the office portion of the site. The office portion of the site has sufficient parking today to meet the ordinance requirements with a surplus. So they didn't go out and get our occupancy counts, in part because there was no shared parking agreement where they had to section off a part of the lot. In the case of the strip center, we really wanted to focus on the portion of the lot that would be shared and making sure that they had sufficient capacity there, because we didn't want the front part of the lot to overshadow that.
Just one last question. Do you know the surplus in the office parking lot?
I can look it up for you. They have 310 spaces total. If the entire lot were calculated to meet ordinance requirements with no shared parking, I believe we have 306 spaces required. So it's a slight surplus. If you were to accommodate the portion that's not medical office, that would drop down. But for the purposes of this study, it was all calculated as medical.
Thank you.
Mr. Senzi.
There appears to be proposed access to Big Beaver along the parking lot of the office building.
Through the cross-access, yeah.
So there won't be any improvements. It's not going to be, and there isn't going to be built as a road. It's going to be part of the
It's a
cross-access.
parking lot.
I see, okay. So they'll be traversing the lot, basically, rather than as a designated road. I understand.
It'll remain basically a driveway, a drive and a parking lot to serve both the aisle, the parking aisle, as well as to get back to the hotel.
Mr. Krent.
Yeah.
And then
The
Dave.
question for the traffic professional. I can see just from that image that's on the screen right now, there's a lot of parking in what I would consider the back of the building, because it doesn't, I consider the front of the building facing Big Beaver. Those are likely to be employees that are told to leave the spaces up front for guests and visitors. My question is, have you done any you said you didn't do a study, but to me, I'd like to see what happens at 5 p.m. Does that northern parking lot area, is that really empty out, or is, I'm just concerned that there's going to be still enough residual cars there. They need, from the slide before, I forgot how many from that particular lot, but it was substantial.
They have a shared parking agreement in place for 50 spots shared with
Okay.
them.
And you think there would be 50 available at 5 p.m. or?
Yeah, so at 5 p.m., think about it in a traditional hotel setting where people are at work during the day and then start coming in the evening. Check-in in the hotel is usually in the mid-afternoon. As an extended stay, a lot of these folks would be here for weeks or potentially months. In general, you'd be going out, you'd be coming back at 5 o'clock. You're really just starting to pick up that evening. It doesn't peak until about 10 o'clock for the hotel. So people would be trickling in, and that's about the same timeline that folks are leaving the office building.
The other quick follow-up question on that is that long, again, going back to that long drive between Big Beaver and the hotel. I know I drive just a standard car, and when there's an SUV parked next to me, I cannot see until I'm halfway out into the drive aisle if there's a vehicle coming. Now, generally it's not a problem, but I'll tell you, at the post office, if you've ever been to our Troy post office, they actually just seem to speed right through. I don't know why the panic, and that's a very short distance as far as a drive aisle. I mean, I'm guessing maybe 15, 20 cars at the most. And I've seen near misses a lot at that post office. So I'm just concerned of that long stretch, and somebody's can't see because of some large vehicle next to them, backing up and then wham. That's my big concern. Is that long drive as an access? I don't know. I don't have an answer. You probably don't either. But I'm just wondering, maybe the developer has an answer for that. Thank you.
Mr. Tate.
Of the cars that are going to be using these two exit and entrance points, one onto Wilshire and one onto Big Beaver, what number of cars do you think are going to be using those? What percentage of breakdown? I don't know what the total number of cars we're talking about here, but I would guess what I'm getting at is what do you, if you've studied it or can project the split in the number of cars that are going to use the Big Beaver entrance exit versus the Wilshire entrance exit?
This is a total shot in the dark. I would say better than half would go out to Big Beaver.
Because right now, everybody at the office building goes out to Big Beaver because there is obviously nothing to the north. Now, would people's habits change if they could cut through the parking lot of the hotel and get to Wilshire? But even Wilshire is not the most desirable street to get on if you want to go north. So I guess, I think my guess would have been a higher number going out to, a higher percentage going out to Big Beaver. And again, the discussion was raised, or the question was raised last meeting, and it's again here. I'm also concerned with the safety of that long drive and not actually putting in some traffic calming measures to slow down, other than the fact that there could be 2 rows of parking on either side of the drive aisle.
You mentioned that the building actually is split office and medical. Do you have an approximate
I don't have that
ratio?
breakdown. Do you?
Do we know that?
I thought we provided it to Julie as part of the study, I think.
We did, we went with 100% medical because it was more conservative.
Right, so the reason I'm asking is just to kind of get a feeling for how much more conservative are we? So we're on the conservative side, but are we 10% medical, or are we 40 or 50, just to see if we're...
So the reason that we go on the conservative side is to provide the office building with flexibility moving forward, so they're not hamstrung if they want to convert some of the general office to medical office because the parking requirements are higher. So that was done to kind of protect the office building moving forward. In terms of what the ratio is today, I gave that information to, not to throw you under the bus, Julie, but I guess I am, and I don't have it on me.
That's fine. I just wanted to ask that in context with the shared parking, try and understand today's data, today's
Right.
Employees that are there in that building, what kind of ratio do we have? And we can't really predict what's going to be in the future. We just wanted to see what we're dealing with today, but okay.
Along those same lines, the strip center, that was broken out by retail and restaurant based on the uses today. There's about 12,000 square feet of dining and about a little over 5,000, 6,000 square feet of retail. So those were broken out based on their current uses. In the future, that could shift a little bit. Right now, the surplus parking does allow that flexibility.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the occupancy study that you did in the parking lot in the rear of those buildings in the PM? You mentioned that the peaks were during the lunch hour.
Yeah.
What about the 5, 6, 7 PM hour range when we start seeing the hotel clientele coming in?
Fleece and Vandenbrink, Julie Kroll is here from them. They are the ones that conducted the occupancy study. They went out between 11 o'clock a.m. and 2 o'clock p.m. and between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock p.m. and collected those counts. What they did is they circulated through the lot on an hour, 15-minute basis, I believe it was. And basically counted the number of vehicles parked in that rear lot and then recorded those so that we could check those trends over time. We looked at the maximum number in use.
Do you have some data you can share with us in terms of how many spaces were available at 6 p.m., for example?
Sure.
As compared to the peak hour during lunch when it's maxed out?
Give me a minute to find it. If memory serves, it was something like 34 out of 36 of the rear spaces were occupied during the peak, the anticipated peak period. So for the midday, which is the 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock, on the day they went out in that back lot where there's 36 spaces, at 12:30, 34 of them were occupied. The peak for the entire parking lot, which included the front areas, that occurred at 12:15, and that was 160 spaces out of 177 total.
Is that data split up between the front and the back during the 6 p.m.?
Mm-hmm. At that 12:15, when the parking lot was most full, 160 out of 177 spaces occupied, the rear lot had 28 out of 36 spaces taken.
That's 12:30. What about the 6, 7 p.m.?
In the
time slot?
evening, between 5 and 7, the 15-minute parking counts varied between 55 and 66 vehicles out of the entire 177 count lot. In the rear, there was between 5 and 6 vehicles in that back shared parking area during that entire 2-hour window. So that's most likely employees.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Was that just done one day of the week? Was that like a Monday night or was that a Friday night?
It was done on a Thursday in August for the midday one and a Thursday in December for the evening one.
Thursday in December when everyone's like Christmas shopping.
It was Thursday, December 8th, 2016.
Okay.
Mr. Sanzikas?
I wonder, do you consider the impact of snow plowing in a parking lot in the winter? Because, I don't know, where if they track the snow off to accommodate the parking spaces or they store it on site. But I know some of my experiences in Troy that in the wintertime, a lot of the parking spaces are utilized for storage of snow. And I just wondered if you included that in your study.
It was not specifically addressed in this study. Typically, to account for maintenance and snow removal and things of that nature, we like to see a parking lot not at 100% capacity. Kind of the rule of thumb that we go with is between 85 and 95% would be kind of our design maximum spaces utilized, which would account for things like that, or vehicles that don't quite park in the space and take up 2 spaces, that sort of thing. In this case, snow removal was not implicitly, here's 10 spaces to put a snow pile.
So your capacity is 85%?
85 to 95, based on the occupancy count that they conducted at that strip center. Today, that's operating more than 90% in that peak hour. So.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Any other questions for the traffic consultant? No.
I somewhat introduced the applicant's team, and I didn't see Scott Bowers, the project architect, hiding back there. So Kenny's architect is here to answer any questions related to the building design.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Jim Butler with PEA. Kenny
Goza, President, Group 10.
I think we covered a lot of information that was asked from the May 22nd meeting. I think we've addressed a lot of those comments and concerns. We do have building materials here if you care to take a look at them. As was pointed out by Mr. Carlisle, those towers were changed to a brick material, and 8% of that building now is made up of EFS. I think the questions related to the traffic and the parking study, meaning the parking study, have been addressed. In context of that drive and that cut through here, potentially to Big Beaver, it does exist today. There is a long straightaway that's there. I don't know how you people drive through parking lots. I certainly don't race through any parking lot. I can't, if this was a straight connection to another road, which it isn't, if someone wants to cut through and have to do this, it's rather circuitous to get there. I can't see someone revving their engine and racing through a parking lot to be able to do that. I think having those cars, and I think even your engineering department had validated that, it is naturally a calming traffic device, having cars parked there. Yes, there is a concern potentially of a car backing out if it's parked next to a large truck or an SUV, no doubt about it. But people use care through parking lots. That isn't a road, it is a parking lot. Like I said, I can share the building materials if you'd like. I can bring it around.
You have the blue brick?
I do. Mr. Bowers can assist.
Yeah, it'll fall out.
Yeah, this is not light.
I understand, that's why you're holding it, I'm not. I just wanted to see, is that going to be glazed? No, it's not glazed, okay.
No, it's not glazed. We
Okay.
chose it not glazed.
That's fine. Just wanted to see what it looked like.
I know you
Always passing it around, so, the comments made it, that, well, it's parking lot. Here's the human nature part of everything. When you're pulling into your office building, or into a building, that these are people likely in the building, and you're gonna see them every day for the next 365 days. So if you whip through the lot and smash their car, you're gonna know about them, because they're gonna come at your office door knocking. People at the hotel, they don't live there, they don't work there. It's like, these are strangers to the zone, and that's my concern more so than, it is a parking lot, people, it's always the 1% for anything that's screwed up for the rest. So, if there's anything you can do to make, and then, okay, so all the people that work at Raymond, they don't want the speed bumps. They've lived with this for 20 years or 30 years there. They don't want to have that encumbrance.
Correct. They do not want the speed bump.
So,
I would say the one thing I could tell you to ease your concern would be that if the hotel patron were to speed through the parking lot, it'd be most likely done at a time that Raymond building is not occupied. My peak times do start at check-in, and usually our check-in is 3 p.m., but people don't really start checking in until after 5 p.m., and then my peak time occurs at 10 p.m. So usually about 10 p.m., I'm sure we can tell you that Raymond parking lot is empty with the exception of cars maybe left overnight for whatever reason. So, of course we want to alleviate any concerns. I don't feel the stretch is any longer than, the place where the airtime is or anything like that. I'm not sure if they can, Brent or anybody else can tell you if they had a lot of parking accidents there or not. But I can tell you because the hotel is a complementary use to the office building, that the office would be most likely empty if someone would decide to zip through that parking lot.
I understand, but is there anything as far as street graphics or lighting or something? I know you'd have to work in agreement with the people that own that building, but I just don't want to see 5 years from now. And again, those kind of accidents are usually minor. I mean, nobody's going to go 50 miles an hour through there. But it's just the fender benders that I'm just trying to find a way to make it less accident prone. I'm looking for suggestions from you. That's what I'm looking for now?
You know, we offered, we asked the engineering department for advice, and they actually felt that the parking space itself was sufficient. And Brent and Ben can tell you, because I wasn't giving advice on that situation. We didn't want to have any bumper blocks or anything like that. But engineering told us, you know what, this would create a calming pathway, and this is sufficient for us to slow down the traffic. So, hey, if engineering Troy is willing to say it, and stand by that, obviously I believe that too.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Faison.
Just a question on the shared parking agreement. Does that survive like an ownership change or use change
Yes.
in the hotel?
Yes.
And also ownership and use changes of the properties that are sharing?
Correct.
The parking with you?
Yes, it does.
So that's in perpetuity?
100%.
Yes.
I'm going to pick up where Mr. Faison left off. I've read that parking agreement. It's a little ambiguous. It does not limit it just to a hotel. It talks about developer, its employees, its guests. And I'm concerned, as Cindy Desmond was in her notes to us, and you've even mentioned it in your video, that it could be converted to an apartment, condominium, or dormitory. I can't approve a parking agreement that leaves that loophole available. If you want to amend that parking agreement to restrict it solely to a hotel, it's okay. I don't want to get into an argument later on when, as you indicated, maybe the economy changes, make into apartments or something of that nature. It's a whole different ballgame, in my opinion, as to the use of a building in that area. So I'm a little concerned about that parking agreement.
So my explanation of what I can change the building to is actually a concern that you guys had mentioned.
Darn right it is.
I am only a hotel developer. I only plan to stay a hotel developer. I don't want to turn it into office, apartments, or condos. I don't do any of that. But it was asked of me what it could become, and so I had to answer that.
And I agree.
But
Let's
I plan to
assume that you
always
don't
keep
want
it
that,
hotel.
but it happens. I want that to come back to this commission if we're going to approve a different type of use on that building. That's my point. But I want to make an observation too. We built a building here in Troy, and I think Jim Butler knows where it is. It's a one-story colonial office building with 3 or 4 different pods in it. It extends off of Town Center Drive. We've been there since 1985. Our office isn't right in the front. And I lost fingers trying to figure out how many times I have attempted to back out of that parking spot, and there's been a truck or an SUV or something in there, and you've got some medical offices at the end of that building. Those patients, I don't know if they're scared about the diagnosis or what, they rip through that parking lot, and you've got to creep out and just keep creeping and hope there's nobody coming down, and if they are, they see you and stop. It's dangerous. That parking lot is dangerous because people just speed and figure it's part of the rain. Man, they're going to get out of there. So I'm not so that strip from Big Beaver through is going to be any less dangerous.
Have you ever been to the mall or Nino Savaggio?
Oh, that's
and
worse.
ventured into those parking lots?
Oh, I agree. Parking lots are dangerous places for people who are driving.
Mr. Sutherland.
So I tend to agree with Mr. Hudson, and I think potentially there's if the planning commission decides to move to forward this application, perhaps a condition of approval would be that in the event that the use changes, and we all hope that it doesn't, but in the event that it changes to something such as condominiums or apartments, it's got to come back to the planning commission for review of the parking study.
And I would suggest even the way it's drafted, it's going to be up to A&E if there is a change. If it's limited to strict a hotel, whether or not they'll even agree to shared parking for a condominium, a dormitory, or an apartment. I think it's essential in that agreement that it should be changed. You've got a great law firm drafting this agreement, but it's a little vague in that area. And I question later on.
And I actually kept it open because I thought that if I were to answer what it could become, but yeah, my agreement didn't allow me to change it, then I thought I'd be shooting myself in the foot. So
I appreciate your point of view.
Which Raymond
That's my
Building,
point
why I
of view,
left it
too.
open-ended for me, so that it was basically sufficing the city based on their concern of what this hotel could possibly become.
Well, I'm not criticizing. I'm
No,
just
I'm
saying, I think there's a
I'm
hole in
explaining
there.
why it's
Yeah.
actually open-ended, and I was very thankful that Raymond worked with me on this.
Is that something that you're willing to consider to revise that agreement, that shared parking agreement?
I'm happy to go with Brent's comments on we come back in front of it if I ever were to change the use. I think that'd be a little simpler and cleaner.
No, I don't think that's agreeable to me, at least. I want something in writing specifically limiting it to a hotel. Then you're going to have to come back to us if you want to change it, and A&E is going to have a choice too as to whether or not they want to do shared parking with a new venture. So that's a deal killer for me.
Mr. Carlos, if this were to change and go to a condo or an office, you would have to come back in front of this body, correct?
Not necessarily.
If it changed to an office?
It's permitted use from a permitted use to another permitted use, and you don't do anything to the site. It can be done through the building department review. The issue it becomes is that per square foot, hotels are some of the least required parking users. So if this were going to go to a condo or an apartment, it would require 2 parking spaces per unit. You basically essentially have half the parking you would be required if it were to convert to an apartment or condo building. So I don't know how you'd address that issue moving forward, but if the parking works and you don't make any site plans, then it would not have to come back to the planning commission if it's permitted.
Thanks for the clarification.
Ms. Cruz?
You know, as I sit here and I listen to different suggestions as to how we might take that parking agreement and make it fit this project, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we are looking at a project that has on its own land, if you will, less than half of the parking required for the whole project. In order to even get close to what it is that they need, they have got to go off-site and strike up deals with other existing tenants to make it work. And we also have a parking professional, a traffic study professional who has stated that these lots are not really as close to the structure, to the hotel, as what they should be. They're a little far away. And I mean, I feel like I could go on and on about some of the challenges that this problem or this project presents that go far beyond fixing some drafting and a parking agreement. I feel like if there ever was an example of taking a piece of land and trying to make a square peg fit into a round hole, this is it. This is it. I don't hate the idea of there being an extended stay facility in the city of Troy. We could probably use it. I don't hate this project if they had all of the parking that they needed on their own land. But it's a domino effect. The more you try and make it fit, the more problems that you run into, and we're sitting here talking about, well, what if it's a condominium and now it's even less? There's half of the parking required for a condominium. I'm a no. I'm a solid no. I'm a heck no on this one.
Mr. Faison?
Just a question, Ben, for you. I thought you said if it were to be a condo or apartments, the parking wouldn't work, right, based on the current? Is that correct?
So if every hotel room, extended stay room, were converted to a condo, it would require 2 parking spaces for every room. A hotel only requires 1 parking space for every room. So essentially they have half the parking they would need if it was to be converted to a condo.
Right.
The only other option would be keep the same footprint and take basically 2 units of rooms and make them 1 apartment room or condo unit. So a change into an apartment would intensify the parking need, which the applicant would either have to come back to the planning commission to get additional relief, or they would have to acquire more parking somehow.
So my point is, a conversion to a use like that had more intensive parking would come back to the planning commission.
You know, thinking, I don't get asked this very much, so my gears are spinning here. Given the fact that the application is predicated on the parking study, thinking it through, maybe that would trigger coming back to the planning commission. Because of the fact that it's predicated on the parking study for that specific use. So we would need to verify that in the event that it changes, that the parking will work. So the parking study would have to come back.
Okay.
Ms. Cruz?
So let's take what you're thinking about. What
And
you're
I'm thinking we
about.
have some control is the point,
Right,
right?
right. But let's take your thought for a second and let's go with it. So this hotel is no longer viable as an extended stay hotel. And the developer or the owner here has the opportunity to sell it to someone who's willing to turn it into condominiums. And it comes back to the planning commission, and our response is, you don't have enough parking. You have half the parking that you need. Well, now, he's not going to be able to sell that building, that footprint, to someone else who thinks they're going to retrofit it because they don't have adequate parking. And now it sits, what, empty? He just owns something that he can't do anything with. And then are we looking at the Met all over again? Are we looking at Kmart all over again? Do we want another 5-story empty building? Again?
Understood. I was actually going back to Mr. Hudson's point of not wanting it to have a different use. So my point is, if it had a different use, would it have to come back? So what you're saying is a different...
Well, but even if it
issue.
comes back,
Right.
if it doesn't have adequate parking, what does it matter? What can we do with it?
So
It would have to be another hotel.
Have to be another hotel.
again, can I explain a couple things here? Again, I never plan on changing it from a hotel to condos. I was only answering for your guys' question of what it could be turned into. But if you was to be changed into condos, something you have to understand is that my hotel rooms are 350 square feet. So if it's going to turn into a condo project or apartment project, the average condo is 1,000 square feet. That means I'm going to have to take 3 rooms and convert it into 1 condo, which means my 107-room hotel is going to turn into about a 35-room condominium project, which means I'm actually going to be parked perfectly. But again, I will never turn it personally into anything but a hotel. If it were to fail as a home too, it's going to stay a hotel. That's what I am. And my company is very financially sound to be able to weather any storm. I'm not a 17-acre site like the Met had. That is a very tired building. If I owned that land, I would have tore it down. I would have redeveloped it. That's what we would do if we were in the city of Troy and owned that piece of property. Unfortunately, I tried to buy that property. I wasn't able to get that property. I would have loved to develop it for you guys. But I'm sitting on 1.56 acres currently right here. And one of the comments I just heard was that my parking was too far. Can you pull up my site plan, please? Because all my adjacent parking is actually, you can see my shared parking is adjacent to my current parking. So how it's further than my current parking spaces, I can't imagine it. We are the developers of the corner of I-75 and Big Beaver, and I have 4 rows that are much, not even as close as these rows of parking currently. So I don't know how we would say that my shared parking is too far away. Also, if you guys looked at all the studies, I did send a whole bunch of reports. We're talking about reducing car counts and the way rental car business is suffering and what they have to do to fight Lyft and Uber and all these other things. The parking demand is not there. As well as I've mentioned before, I sit on your DDA, the Troy Downtown Development Authority, and what we hate is sea of parking. So I was actually creative enough to go out and work with my neighbors to have shared parking so that I didn't have a sea of parking. So I'm getting mixed messages. Do we want sea of parking? Do we not want sea of parking? I'm a complement use to an office building. I'm the #1 use to be next to it. We have completely different hours of operations. So when they don't have parking, I have parking for them, and vice versa. It's really not that complicated. I understand the concerns of traffic going through and car accidents and stuff, but that's an inherent evil of just driving in general. There are plenty of parking lots and developments that all have these concerns that have gotten approved before your board, before us. Now, so I'm happy to do whatever you want to do in terms of the easement to have them revise the language. I'd love to get approved based on that language being altered. But as I see it, I'm the developer, and I'm 100% comfortable with this shared parking agreement. I will also note that if you guys are concerned about my access and improving my access off of Big Beaver, I actually currently have access through the e-title property. It's already an easement that exists. It's deeded easement. No one can take that from us. I don't have to have approval to use it. It's already in play. If you notice, that's why there's no parking spaces to the west right there by the dumpster area. That access is e-titled, but they weren't as friendly as the Raymond building in providing a shared parking agreement. So I wanted the access more direct, and obviously Raymond gave me the shared parking agreement, but I also have another access to Big Beaver through e-title. Maybe you guys want to, I can use that. Now I have 2 entrances to Big Beaver, which might alleviate the speed and the traffic that flows onto Big Beaver. So I think I created a very wonderful site. I don't know what else could be better than my 5-story hotel. You'd most likely get a 1-story something. You know, you wouldn't get a 5-story high-rise like I'm building for you right now.
So the point of contention that we have right now is obviously the shared parking agreement not being explicit enough to restrict that use to only a hotel. What I heard from you is
I have no problem ending that.
you're so confident that that will be, as long as you're the owner, that will be only hotel use. So what you're presenting before us tonight is, can you translate your confidence into something in writing to
Yes.
restrict that only to hotel use?
Only open-ended simply because I thought it was a better way to present it to you, because I thought you guys would say, well, you can't turn it into anything else.
So, Mr. Hudson?
I'm comfortable with that.
I think we're hearing the applicant say that he's willing to translate that into a changed verbiage of that agreement.
Yeah.
To reflect
That
his
would be
commitment
extremely helpful to me,
Okay.
yes.
And that's voluntarily.
Not a
offered.
problem,
Correct.
as long as you prove it.
I'm still an adamant no. I think, shared parking is one thing, but when it's over half your spaces, I just think I think it's too much. It's too much. And I'm not convinced either that the other uses might not find some impact where they butt, right? Where the people in the hotel are butting with the people that they're trying to share parking with. And, I just think that this is not the ideal site for this project. I don't mind the project. I don't think this is the ideal piece of land for it. And for all the reasons I've stated, primarily that over half the parking has to be found elsewhere.
So just going back and addressing the issue if this building footprint changes use in the future. At this point, that's all hypothetical. So for this conversation, that's all hypothetical, but let's take that in consideration. So I think if we analyze it from that perspective, the applicant's logic and the numbers make sense that a unit would not be converted, a 300 square foot unit would not be converted to a 300 square foot condo. So that would be a 1-to-3 ratio, which would probably bring down the required parking to pretty much
Right.
what it is today.
Right, but
it
if-
would still require the shared parking.
Right.
So if we are concerned about the shared parking in a hypothetical situation more than we're concerned about it today, or I guess if we're concerned about it today, we should be concerned about it equally in the future.
Okay.
But the equivalent is about 1-to-3, which would be the same shared parking as it is today.
Okay, so it could be a condo, it could be a micro unit, right? Because really, there are many of the millennials that are quite fine in living in a micro unit or staying in a micro unit, right? And we talk here at this planning commission about focusing on the millennial crowd. They don't necessarily want a condo, so it could be micro units. But again, let's push the future to the side. I still think that today, given the use as an extended stay hotel that has weird accesses, I mean, these are not direct accesses. They're through buildings and down a parking lot and whatever, and then over 50% of the parking coming from other places. That alone, these things alone are deal breakers and shouldn't even get us to the future. We don't even need to go to the future. It doesn't work now.
Mr. Senzi.
I think that's what makes this board so unique. We all have our opinions, and we respect your opinion. But on the other hand, I do see the fact that they've put a lot of planning into this. It's quite an attractive building. Is there still going to be a public hearing? Proposed?
No, it's not a public hearing.
Not a public hearing. So the discussion would be pretty much to the board.
You're the approving body for this application. Does not go to city council.
But I'm ready to make a resolution, and I think your vote will be what it is, and we'll see what the rest of the board feels.
So then what I heard you say is that you
I don't have any
feel
problem.
sympathetic about all the hard work that the developer has put into this project and that the building itself is attractive, so despite the other problems
Well, I
that
don't
come
see
with
the
the
problems
project.
that you see, quite honestly. I respect your opinion, but on the other hand, I think the site is small, the distance to the shared parking isn't that far, relatively speaking. It's a 1 acre or 2 acre site or whatever it is. And quite honestly, on the what if situations, if it's were to change to a condominium or whatever, that's his responsibility. It's his risk in building this facility. And I think that's the charm of being a developer. He has to take the risk and proposing the development and financing this project, and he's the one that has to make sure that this is going to work as he's proposed. So I'm ready to make a resolution. I don't know if
I think Mr. Tagle still wants to comment.
Yeah, I'm really concerned at the resistance that we've heard from you about some traffic calming, as simple as some speed bumps. To me, it's a safety concern. And it's enough of a deal breaker for me because you continually want to tell us why you're not going to do it, how you're going to go to the next property, get your access. And I'm having a real problem with that presentation.
Actually, I answered that to this gentleman here, and I said Raymond didn't want bumpers. And I then asked Ben to ask for advice from
Raymond's not approving
engineering.
this project.
I know, but I don't own their land.
Well,
and believe me, I would love to add bumper blocks if I can proceed with caution signs somehow into the boulevard. I could do that.
In my opinion,
But
there has to be something.
But I would just make it clear, I can offer another access to Big Beaver to have 2 roads in there to make it more calming. But I mean, when your engineer department's, I'm asking for advice and they're giving me.
I've heard this. Thank you. It's not going to work for me. If you're continuing to tell me no in different ways, it's not going to work for me.
I can't control the property owner.
Mr. Grant.
Could you do anything as far as graphics? Well, before you even get into that, where are the signs? Is there going to be a sign announcing your business on Big Beaver or on Wilshire?
I have to go for a variance for signage.
For both situations?
No, not on my property, to get one on Big Beaver.
Okay. All right. And then the follow-up would be?
So I could put on my property, entity in Raymond's building, please proceed with caution, or I could put maybe a 10-mile-per-hour sign there. Maybe even Raymond would let me put on Big Beaver 10-mile-per-hour sign or something.
Something like that.
I mean,
just
I can
to
do
call
it.
attention
I
to
can
it.
do it on my property because I own my property.
Just something to call attention to that you've got to proceed carefully through this zone. And I don't have an answer for you right now, but I'm thinking some kind of graphics, not speed bumps, some kind of lighting. I know that, I guess that parking
We've
lot's-
thought about graphics, it's just because of the way the parking spaces are lined up, it's where do I put them, And again, it's Raymond wasn't really too keen on those type of things. I'm happy to do it all over my property if you like.
Well, that won't help because
Well, when they enter onto Raymond, I can put a caution sign, I can put a speed limit sign.
Okay, something there to
that should
call attention.
provide a little buffer. And at least, maybe if the person does speed through Big Beaver and then hit my property, they can see next time, be more cautious.
All right, and one last thought. I'm not too concerned. I mean, I'm concerned about the shared parking, but I'm not too concerned because every projection I've seen in publications for planning commissioners or for planning directors, for planning departments, is saying that eventually the parking requirements are going to have to be lessened because of the newer transportation, autonomous vehicles I'm talking about. And so it's basically a call up your ride. And I'm not saying this is, again,
Plus,
now,
Troy's doing great with the trolley system. It's been picking up tremendously. They got massive amounts of car counts and everything. The app's working out great.
Okay, so I'm not terribly concerned about the future, but like Ms. Cruz said, what about the now? The now is where I'm focused, and the now is mainly that run up through the Raymond parking lot. So that's it. Maybe you've heard what I have to say.
I think, just kind of stepping back for a second, Mr. Savinant mentioned earlier related to that site there in the corner of Waddles and Rochester, all the easy sites are gone. And I think that applies to commercial as well. So the easy project would have been to have this hotel right there on the corner of Big Beaver and Crooks, or fronting Big Beaver. We would have not had this aisle here, we would have not had that access issue on Wilshire, and we probably wouldn't have had this conversation. So we have a project before us where we're dealing with the tough sites, we're dealing with the tough issues, hard access points, shared parking issues today, in the future, projecting in the future. So, that's what we have before us. We don't have an easy site before us. So I think we just have to look at what was given to us and say, what do we have here that we have to take in account and look at it.
The one thing that,
Me first, lady.
well, you know,
Never mind.
age before beauty. I couldn't help myself.
I'm just thinking, in my opinion, all these parking lots are so dangerous because you've got parking and your view is obstructed, and people don't think about anybody else when they try and pull out.
Mm-mm.
What if we had no parking on that strip? Just a road?
Parking for everything.
Your engineering department, we asked them that, and they said that the road caused a more slowing effect, and Ben can confirm that.
Well, that's engineering. You're talking to real people here now tonight. Okay, just a suggestion.
Ms. Cruz.
Just to follow up to your comment about there are no easy projects left, that's true, right? There are no easy projects left. And so to some degree, what we're going to see are developers who are late to the party, if you will. They want to get those last little bit of projects in the city of Troy while the getting's good. And I appreciate that. But I would say just because we have the few parcels left, that doesn't mean that every project has to have a path to yes if it doesn't work. I would like for us to keep our objectivity, on these harder projects. We're probably going to have tougher conversations, but again, it's not like every project has to lead to yes. We have so much more that we need to think about in terms of the residents of the city and the things that we've heard on Planning Commission as they come up to that microphone and they talk and they tell us how they feel about their city and what they want. I lost track of the number of times I've heard variance here. I suspect we're going to hear it more. But I'm just saying that not every project is going to have a path to yes. You have to think about the whole big picture.
So one thought I have here, does anybody want to share just another hypothetical, another what if? So for this body, if we don't want this hotel here, if we don't think that's an appropriate project, what is? Does anybody want to share their thoughts? I mean, just kind of more candidly, what do you think is appropriate project for that location that fits better there in terms of use, in terms of height, in terms of compatibility? Anybody want to venture?
I actually wanted to say
Yes,
something
go.
before you asked your what if. So
Sure.
putting your what if aside, I have two things. One is, why would ENA, knowing that they want to use this as a pathway, why would they object to having speed blocks or speed bumps or some kind of thing to traffic calming? When they're willing to share.
I can't speak to why they did or
Do
didn't
you
want
know
that to
why
happen.
they objected? They didn't give you a reason?
Well, Raymond didn't want speed bumps, but traffic engineering didn't say that it was necessary. They felt the 2 rows, and Jim can speak better eloquently about that than I can. But Raymond didn't want bumper blocks, and I obviously don't control that site. I'm happy to put them on my site.
I asked engineering about the traffic issue. They did say that in situations such as this, parking on both sides would slow down traffic. I didn't ask them about potential traffic incidents of people backing out into that drive lane and the sight lines. They were specifically asked, the speed condition, what's a way to control speed? They said parking on both sides is a natural speed reducer.
But I think of the post office, like Mr. brought up, and I'll tell you that I'm so nervous going into the Troy Post Office. And I think that Mr. Santico was right. There's been a lot of effort put into figuring out the shared parking. I think that the trends, I think Carlton, Mr. Faison pointed it out, less and less are we relying on, it's not just autonomous vehicles, but even just Uber, Lyft, those kinds of.
Do you use Uber and Lyft?
Yeah.
All the time? You just get on your phone and get on your app and call?
If I'm not in Troy, yes.
But if you're in Troy, what are you doing?
But I'm not staying in an extended stay in Troy.
But someone who's, off-site with a job for a 90-day project is going to use a car. They're going to use a car. If you're here for 90 days with GM on a project, you're using a car. Yeah. You're not Ubering for 90 days to work.
But the point is, that was included in the study. The study did say it was acceptable for the parking that they're proposing. So, these what-ifs are, I think what they're saying is that there's a trend that there will be less use of cars in the future. But today, the study shows that there is enough parking with the shared parking agreements that will accommodate the site. So I have to take credence to what the professionals are saying as far as the parking goes. So I think, we can discuss this till we're blue in the face, but I think this is a viable project and we should go ahead with it, with the conditions that we will be proposing.
I do have one more comment, and that is that I am concerned about the amount of traffic on Big Beaver. I mean, parking aside, I'm starting to get worried about how many more cars are going to be on our main thoroughfares. And Big Beaver is already backlogged, and I'm just worried, and I don't know if this is, as I brought up at the last Planning Commission meeting, I think this is a bigger conversation that we need to have around, as we add, 100 cars here, 30 cars there, 50 cars here, what is the long-term impact?
I think that's a legitimate concern. I think, Big Beaver is road commission jurisdiction, so if you wanted to actually kind of get a better picture of that, we should reach out to them so they can give us some information on the capacity of Big Beaver today, the level of service, so different projects, how they impact Big Beaver, short-term, long-term, so we can get a good feel. But I think when Big Beaver was turned into a boulevard the way it exists today, I think a lot of those projections were taking into account of the growth that would occur along Big Beaver, not just over a 10-year period, but probably a 40, 50-year period. If I would just venture and guess, that's. But I think we should reach out to them if we wanted that type of analysis presented, so we could get a better feel for that. Mr. Hudson.
In answer to your hypothetical question, I haven't got a specific use, but I share Ms. Koopa's observation. We've got a 5-story building. We're looking for people to come and go as part of the ordinary course of business. That is going to substantially increase the traffic problem on Crooks and Big Beaver. I share that concern. But, I'm usually a guy crabbing about traffic studies not being accurate. I've read this one a couple times now since I had a lapse the last meeting, and I'm satisfied. It's a pretty good parking study, and even though I don't necessarily agree with the result, the logistics are there, the math is there, and it's okay.
Any other thoughts, comments, or are we ready to make a motion? Anyone ready to make a motion with an amendment offered by the...
I'd say at least one more thing, being again, it's hotel, my traffic is from 6 p.m. and on. If it was another office building, then you would have office to the north, office to the south, all exiting the Crooks and Big Beaver at the exact same time. But because my use is different and complementary to the parking around me, I'm actually using Big Beaver and Crooks at low peak hours. So I'm actually not adding further congestion during the peak times when traffic is heavy on Big Beaver.
Care to propose?
No, you were starting and we got interrupted, so you can continue.
Well, maybe you would like to add the legal terms into the
Well, if this is a condition of rezoning, I would just hope the resolution would say,
It's not.
well, even if it's not a condition of rezoning, I'd like the resolution to reflect that as part of the approval, that the shared parking agreement be amended or changed to reflect that this parking easement and agreement is limited specifically to a hotel being erected by the developer, period.
So if I may, maybe we can include that in the resolution that I'm proposing. I'd like to go ahead then, to be finally resolved, that the preliminary site plan approval pursuant to our Article B of the zoning ordinance as required for the proposed Home to Suites Hotel north of Big Beaver, west of Crooks, parcel 8820/20/476/060, section 20, within the Big Beaver District B, granted subject to the following. Provide transparency calculations to confirm that the transparency requirements are met, and two, the resolution that the shared parking agreement be modified to specifically include the proposed use that's
As its sole use.
Is presently is being presented.
Moved by Mr. Sensico to include those amendments. Can I get a second on that?
Discussion?
Discussion? Sure.
Was it supported?
Well, let me support that, and then
Okay.
Support by
I support it.
Supported by Mr. Hudson. Discussion.
I would like a stipulation added that the developer put some type of traffic calming devices in this project that not on his property. I don't know where he's going to put it, but I have a concern if that doesn't happen. I have a safety issue concern. I appreciate what our engineering department says, but I still am concerned with the safety of that road or that drive aisle.
an amendment to the motion.
Yes.
I accept the amendment.
So I completely agree that that drive aisle can use some kind of traffic calming device. But my concern is, and I'd like to ask Mr. Motsney about the issue that was already brought up. Can we make that a requirement and a stipulation that the applicant provide something on somebody else's property as a condition?
But the condition, well, you can't make a condition requiring off-site improvements. That's that is true. But you, other than that, the applicant, you can impose other conditions, such as Mr. Hudson indicated, because of the leeway the Planning Commission has in this particular site plan approval, because technically the Planning Commission has to find that the parking requirements are met. But you have some leeway in that in this case you can approve a deviation, and so you can impose conditions. But actually a particular condition requiring an off-site improvement is not a reasonable condition.
Can we request the applicant to make a good faith effort to come to an agreement with the property owner to provide something in terms of traffic calming, or would that also be a condition? Like a good faith effort to come to an agreement to provide something that isn't there today, to make some level of improvement. I mean, that's ambiguous, but...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Didn't we do that last week, at the last session, where the landscape trees along that site east of...
Square Lake?
Yeah, Living Square. And he approached the neighbor to look at adding additional landscaping, provide a buffer. And there was a recommendation, I don't think it was a condition of approval, but it was a recommendation that they would go ahead and approach the neighbor to the east to do that. And I guess if we could frame the resolution that Mr. Table had as a request to approach to the property owner to the proposed site, that able to do that. But we did that last week, and I don't know.
I think something along those lines would be acceptable.
Okay. I think maybe to add a little bit more teeth to that, or more the professional angle, maybe if we can request that the applicant engage the traffic consultant for recommendations and not just make it a three-party conversation? Maybe, would that satisfy Mr. Tagle?
Yeah, I do have a question
Okay.
for the attorney. In the easement agreement, can't there be language in that agreement that talks about safety?
Certainly.
Because that's the core of the issue for me. Now, do you consider that an imposition to put something, to create a safer environment in the easement area? Something that you can't force on someone else on off-site development?
No, it's kind of a fine line in the gray area. Yeah, you could impose safety conditions, but actually requiring an off-site improvement, that's the language that's generally used. You can't require that as a condition of approval. But you want to use words like, I don't want to call them weasel words.
You just did.
But yes, you can impose such requirements for health, safety, and welfare reasons. You see those in agreements all the time.
So can you help us or help me with what kind of weasel words?
Well, I actually started trying to write something down, and I'm already lost as to what the resolution is. I hope Kathy's taking better notes than me, but.
Well, let me ask you this as an aside. Have you reviewed the easement agreement?
I haven't reviewed this agreement very thoroughly.
So if we make the motion to include some type of safety, I don't know how it's called, devices, but somewhere along those lines, be part of the easement agreement, it's going to come to you at some point to review the whole agreement.
The zoning ordinance requires a shared parking agreement to be approved by the city attorney and recorded with the Register of Deeds. So it has to come to the city attorney. So if you grant site plan approval, before they can get final approval, the city attorney's office has to approve.
And that includes the easement itself?
Right, that is correct.
The road or the drive?
Yes.
Yes. I guess I would like to see as part of the motion that within the easement agreement, there are measures taken to improve the safety along that drive aisle between the property and Big Beaver.
Would appropriate language be implement appropriate traffic calming devices? Or is that?
That's probably going too far. What Mr. Tagle suggested is probably acceptable.
Okay.
I hope you got that the first time, Kathy.
If I can clarify, I got the first two conditions, fine. But the third condition that you're maybe going to get approved is the measures taken to improve the safety along the drive aisle by the property.
From the property to the Big Beaver.
From the property
to Big Beaver.
To Big Beaver.
As part of the easement.
Okay.
Okay. I think we got everything included in there now. Any other comments?
One quick comment, I don't want to belabor anything, but I didn't hear the first part of the resolution. I just heard the finally resolved. We didn't hear about hereby approves, Planning Commission hereby approves the deviation of off-street.
Oh, you're absolutely right, I'm sorry.
Off-street requirements by approving 60 on-site, so that should be read in, I believe.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Should I read that?
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
And further be resolved, the Planning Commission hereby approves the deviation of off-street parking requirements by approving 60 on-site parking spaces when 112 spaces are required by zoning ordinance. The 62 space parking deviation utilizes shared parking on 2 abutting properties and are supported by a parking study completed by Felicia Vanderbrink and affirmed by the city traffic consultant, OHM, is authorized by section 1306F of the City of Troy zoning ordinance.
Okay, and then Mr. Hudson, second.
I'll second that, yes. Second modification.
Okay, thank you. Good catch. Any other discussion, or are we ready for a vote? I think we're
I'm ready for a vote.
A vote. Ms. Sarnicki, please.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa?
Yes.
Mr. Zanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
No.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Item number 9 on the invite public comment for items on the current agenda. Is there the audience wishing to speak to an item that is on the agenda tonight?
My name is Agnes Lane.
Sure.
And I live in Troy. What happens when you make these resolutions contingent upon talking to somebody? What if you talk to that somebody and that somebody says, no way, I'm not going to let you put shrubs on your property. I'm not going to let you do that. What do you do then if you've already given approval to the applicant? Does that nullify it? Does it do anything to it?
So if the resolution is make a good faith effort to talk to the neighbors and ask the neighbors if you can put shrubs in our property, and the neighbor says no, then there's no shrubs.
So if in this case that you just approved tonight, if they don't come to some sort of an agreement about how you can have better traffic pattern down that straightaway, it just goes away completely.
Yes.
Yep.
Doesn't seem right to me.
I don't know if that's true. If it's part of the easement agreement that it has to be safer than what it is today, I don't know how they can not do something.
The difference with, I'm not an attorney, the difference with this, the conversation, the action that was made last week didn't involve a specific easement. This involves specific easement language. I'm not an attorney, I've said enough. Alan can fill in the blanks if he needs to.
Like I said, we'll have to approve the form of the agreement, and we'll make sure it complies with the resolution. And we'll, obviously, our office will make sure that the health, safety, welfare concerns of the planning commission are incorporated into the agreement.
And again, not speaking as an attorney, but speaking as a planner, deals with the pragmatic, come up with solutions and dealing with actions of the planning commission. It is an off-site improvement, correct? Yes, but that site that's not part of the subject parcel is being utilized for not only shared parking but also access. So it's not really that heavy-handed, because it's not a parcel that's sitting there and has really no interaction with this application. This parcel is a component of the approval for the subject parcel. So it's a little bit different than the shrub example, if that makes sense.
Or put another way, extend that argument, that you want to have a traffic light put in 2 blocks away at an intersection. Clearly, you can't do an off-site improvement that way if you don't own it. But this is so closely connected with the parking, as you suggested, that it'll work.
Sure.
How do you enforce it?
They don't get final site plan approval until this is approved. They can't start construction until the language is agreed upon.
So it's up to the city attorney's office to determine what that safety measure will be.
With input from various departments, including engineering, planning, et cetera.
Item number 10 on the agenda, Planning Commission comments. Start with Mr. Faison tonight.
So I'll go back to something that was said earlier by a couple of people, right? No easy projects or limited easy projects, and I think this was an example of that. And I guess my comment is that it feels like we're having a fair number of conversations around the table where we don't come to a unanimous agreement. I think that's okay, but I think it's good that we have that dialogue, hear those different point of views, and make sure we weigh them all as we come to that decision. So, that's all.
Yeah. Mr. Tagle.
I'm good tonight, thank you.
Ms. Cooper.
I'm good tonight. Just read that zoning board.
Mr. Krent.
Nothing.
Mr. Stanzika.
I had a question for Mr. Savin. They mentioned the Met site, and presently there's a fence, a snow fence around the site. I was wondering, are they proposing any, why did they put the fence up basically, and what are they proposing?
I can't speak to why the fence was put up. I'm going to guess it was to secure the site, to keep people away, that type of thing. Safety is my guess. The owner of the property is actively trying to find a tenant for the site. They are having conversations with us related to brownfield redevelopment funding and the potential to use that funding to demolish the building, et cetera. So that's ongoing.
So it's safety concerns, basically.
That's my guess.
Yeah. So they didn't need any approval from the city.
No, they had to pull a fence permit.
Oh. I'm happy to, by the way, I'm happy to see the development across the street. That multi-use site. It's, I see the attention of utilities and all those things are going in now, and it's, I'm happy to see it's finally moving ahead.
Yes.
And I do, it's ironic, I have had several of the neighbors of that town even development call me regarding the site. I'm trying to explain what the issues are, and I think that, you're doing a great job, Mr. Zevin. It's part of your job to keep the citizens informed and answer their questions. Sometimes it's not always easy, but that's your job, and I'm sure you're doing a great job. So thank you.
Ms. Harnicke?
None, thank you.
Mr. Hudson?
Nothing.
Ms. Bruce?
My only comment tonight is, we've talked before about trying to get our message out here on Planning Commission to the residents of the city of Troy about the different laws that we look at when we go to make a decision on a project and that sort of thing. And I know that there's been some improvements and things done out on the city website, but I was leafing through a Troy Today magazine, and I noticed that there are other city departments that take up space in that magazine and tell a story or, do something within that magazine that promotes their department, and I noticed that Planning Commission was missing.
I just heard a volunteer, I think.
But I think that in that Troy Today magazine, there ought to be some Planning Commission things. Not sure what, but if other city departments are using it, why aren't we to get that message out? I feel pretty certain people leaf through it to see what the programs are that are going on through Parks and Rec.
I think you've got the material already. Ben's had some PowerPoint presentations. When we get a condition of rezoning or a site plan approval, I could very easily, I think, Karen, if you want to do it, put it in print.
So I'm happy to review whatever you submit. No, seriously, I think that's good input. We're looking at, I don't want to steal my thunder. I was going to introduce Jackie. I'll wait. We've talked about internally about the message and the narrative and why I referenced Jackie, who I haven't even introduced to you yet, is she's a Troy resident, so she hears the discussion at the grocery store and at the tennis club and things like that. So it's interesting hearing that from a resident. So as part of that story that we're trying to tell, that is an excellent suggestion, and we'll look at that.
Mr. Hudson?
No, thank you.
Mr. Carlisle? Mr. Soto?
So he's been elbowing me for the last 10 minutes and be brief. So two things.
It's an hour.
I've been up since 4:30 with my 1-month-old, so I'm tired.
So the annual MAP conference is coming up. It's to be in Grand Rapids this year. Typically the conference is a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. This year it is a joint conference with the MML, the Michigan Municipal League, and it is a Thursday, Friday, Saturday this year. The dates are the 20th, 21st, and 22nd, and I'll be sending out a link to the MAP website so you can review the programming and see, let me know if there's any interest. You don't have to do a reply, I'll just reply to me. September, late September. So I'll send that link out and we can, it's kind of like we'll do an electronic show of hands to see who's interested, so we can check the budget, make sure there's enough money there. And saving the best to last, I'd like to introduce to you our new administrative assistant, Jackie Ferentz, and I asked her to stand up and say a few words about herself, so no pressure.
I really have to say
Yes,
that?
yes.
But you have to be brief.
I will be very brief. Nice to meet all of you. Thank you for having me tonight.
I am a Troy resident, very proud Troy resident, parent to 2 children that go to Troy School District. My previous job, I had the honor of working in the Troy Fire Department with our local heroes, and very excited. It's been a short amount of time, but working with a group of people who have the same integrity and the same passion for our city, and a very patient open door system, because I've already shared like ideas and things like that with Brent about placing articles in local magazines, Facebook ideas. So I'm very excited, and thank you for having me.
Well, welcome.
Well, we expect to see you here for every meeting. No, I'm joking.
Karen's got that job.
Karen's
Or Kathy. Kathy.
Wow, is this
Past my bedtime too, pal.
You're busy.
That's all good.
Congratulations.
Nothing, I have nothing tonight, so we are adjourned. Thank you.
All right.